Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Amber Abila. I am a binge eating and overeating coach, and I am here today to teach you how to eat just one piece of chocolate. Who doesn't want to do that? You are going to learn how to master moderation, how to eat anything in moderation, whether that's one piece of chocolate, one cookie, one scoop of ice cream. You're going to learn how to do it today. So, who here has heard this term, eat 80% healthy and 20% not so healthy? This also looks like eat 80% clean, 20% not clean, 80% whole foods, 20% processed foods. There's a lot of variations of this, but I know I heard this all the time in my journey learning how to have a healthy relationship with food. And it's not bad advice. Like, we would all love to eat 80% 20, not 20% not so healthy, but the problem is most of us don't really know how to do this. It is a nice saying, but when it comes to reality, it's just a saying, right? So I remember one time I was at this party, and there was tons of food around. It was some sort of event. There was a huge dessert table with like 20 different types of cookies. It was like a ridiculous amount of cookies. And I got like 3 of them and I was obsessing over getting more. I just wanted to eat more. I had such a hard time stopping. I think I ended up eating like 5 of them. Meanwhile, I was with one of my friends and she was a newer friend, and it was really interesting. I remember so clearly. She took like 2 bites of a cookie, put it down, and just forgot about it. It was just engaged in conversation and just moved on. So I think we all have some sort of example in our life of someone who is this normal natural eater who just has some of something and moves on without the drama and guilt and shame that you might be dealing with if you're listening to this presentation today. So I just think it is so important to learn how to actually do this so we can become the type of eater we want to be. So the first thing we want to look at is, what is moderation anyways? I find it really useful to define terms, especially something like moderation is very vague. So I went to Google and I learned that moderation is the avoidance of excess or extremes, right? So this is a very broad definition, but if we think about in relation to food, having food in moderation, eating in moderation, is eating without excess or extremes. So what this means is you need to decide what an excessive amount or extreme amount of food is for you, because it's different. So maybe that is just one piece of chocolate. Maybe it's half a bar of chocolate for you. Maybe you're used to eating a whole bag of chips. So eating half a bag of chips is looking like moderation for you at this point, and that's okay. You want to just get clear on what is an excess and extreme for you so you know where to put that boundary. So you know as you're eating throughout the day when you're starting to get out of your definition of moderation. Sometimes I don't even love the word moderation. I think it sometimes can feel a little restriction, but I know it's the word we use the most probably to describe this. So you can even think about if there's a word that resonates with you better, such as like eating in alignment with what you want and how much you want. But getting clear on what it is for you is important as we move forward. So hello again, I am Amber Avila. I also go by The Confident Eater on all the social medias. And I started my journey with extreme calorie restriction, as most of us do. And then I had a long history of binge eating, but I found myself in the longest period in this land of middle ground of overeating and binge eating. I fell in between both of those and I wasn't really sure what to call myself. Was I just overeating? Was I a binge eater? And I really struggled the most with my relationship with food, specifically in this area of moderation. So it's a big pillar I teach in my program, the Confident Eater program. I teach a lot about moderation because it was something in my journey. I was like, how the heck do you just have one of something? Like, that is impossible for me. I thought I was just never going to be able to eat in amounts that felt good because I was the dessert queen. I would never say no to anything. I would just end up stuffing myself. I wanted to get it all in. Food just gave me a lot of anxiety. I love to travel, but as I would go travel around the world or even just over to a friend's house, it was just so scary for me because I didn't know how I was going to be able to eat. certain foods if they had them. If my friend was offering me ice cream or something, or we going on a little ice cream date, I would be so terrified that I would end up overly full and stuffed. And not only that, I would end up eating more after because I'd be so guilty and ashamed of what I had just eaten that I'd say screw it and just continued the day with my bad eating. So this is something that was definitely a big sticking point in my journey. And I think it is a lot of people's journey. I learned a lot about a lot of other aspects around a relationship with food, but I really got stuck on the moderation aspect. And now I do not, because of this trigger food process I am going to teach you today. It is literally life-changing. You guys are totally going to enjoy it. I know it. And I will be teaching it to you in the coming minutes. So the main problem I see people having when they're trying to eat things in moderation is, first, we have these good, bad food labels. So we think this food is good, this food is bad, right? Like we have the donut is bad, the apple is good. Most people would say that. Now, of course, donuts and apples are very different nutritionally, right? They are not the same nutrition wise, but they are the same morality wise. And what's happening is when we use this good, bad word around it, those are morality words. Those are words that have to deal with, how good of a person we are in this world. So when we start telling ourselves this apple is a good food and then we eat it, now this one might seem like it would be good because we're telling ourselves we're a good person. But that means there's also times for us to be a bad person, which is when we're eating the donut. When we're eating the bad food, all of a sudden we feel like we're becoming a bad person. And that's really hard to get out of. We get really down on ourselves then. And it just puts a lot of weight into the decision. It makes it so hard to make these food decisions. If you're someone who's thinking about food all day, has a hard time deciding what to eat, is just in this constant indecision, it's probably because you have a lot of good, bad food labels and you're putting so much pressure to make this decision, knowing that there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. And I don't know which one it is, and I don't know which I'm going to choose today. When we have the good, bad food labels, this will often lead us into all or nothing thinking. So all or nothing thinking is as it sounds. You guys have probably heard this before, where you're either going all out with food, you're saying, screw it, I'm going to eat what I want, or you're saying nothing. I'm not going to have anything that I truly want because I'm going to be good this week. We can also call this black and white thinking. We're either this way or that way. There's no in between, right? And when we are like this, we are left either feeling overly full and stuffed and really guilty, or we are left feeling deprived. Like, oh, I just really want this food and I never get it. And that's a hard place to be in. Who wants to be deprived and guilty? There's no right answer. And so that oftentimes will let us throw up our hands and say, screw it, there's no right decision. I'm just going to eat everything. Now, what's interesting is even when you do go all out, and you're feeling guilty for it, you also might start to feel deprived as well. Because a lot of times when we're in this mindset, it doesn't even feel like we're eating any food, even when we're eating all of it, because we're so mindless and zoned out the whole time in our head. We get to the end of it, we get to the end of the bag of chips, end of the bowl, and all of a sudden we just feel this desire for more. And we want to keep eating more and more. And we're so confused because we allowed ourselves permission to have it. Why do we want more? But it's because we were so frantic about it and so just not in our bodily experience, which is how the eating experience happens in our body. And when that happens, we're going to want to eat more. So there's really no win-win of this situation. It's a lose-lose situation with all or nothing thinking. The third problem I see people doing is putting foods on a pedestal. And this is one we often aren't aware of, but I see people doing all the time. This is when we have thoughts or we say things like, it's so yummy. It's really special. I never get this. We just got done with the holidays and the holiday season. That's a big one. Like, I just never get this. Or it's dangerously good. Like, get this away from me. It's dangerous. I can't stop myself when I eat it. It's just that good, right? Notice how when we're thinking those things, how you feel. You probably feel a lot of desire for the food. The food all of a sudden sounds really freaking delicious, right? And we can do this with any food. Like, we can tell ourselves, I don't know, with spinach, like, I love how when I put the lemon juice on the spinach, I love how tasty it tastes and how refreshing I feel. And I love the little crunch and the tear feeling of spinach. I love the feeling of the leaves in my mouth. It feels so cool. And I love munching on them. I like to taste the greenness of it. Like, that's kind of fun. We can create desire for things just by telling ourselves a certain story. So notice if you're telling yourself this big desire story about how amazing this food is with certain things, how you're going to have this extra desire that you don't really want. And that makes it harder for you. Right? It makes you want to get it all in, right? Just while you have it, while you have this amazing special food, it's not going to be very conducive to an abundance mindset where we can get into this place of moderation, right? Where we can have just one of something and move on, because if it's not that special, then it's easier to move on. So I want us to get clear now on all the amazing ways your life would change if you were able to do moderation. So imagine if you could just have just one piece of chocolate or one cookie or one of a few pieces of chips. If you could do that and just move on, what would be different about your life? Why this is so important to get clear on is because it will help you stay motivated throughout this process. And it will help you remember why you're trying to eat foods in moderation. It's not something someone just said to you one day and you're like, I think that's good advice. It's something you genuinely want to do. So some ideas of some things that changed for me in my life when I found moderation. You're able to feel more in charge and empowered around your food decision. You're not feeling in control anymore. You're feeling confident when you're making these food decisions. And that allows you to make more balanced choices, which feels better overall. And as we're trusting ourselves more and more with making these food decisions, with trusting ourselves around moderation, we feel more confident in who we are and our skills around food. You're able to move through your day lighter and more energetic because you're not weighed down by all that extra food from saying screw it at lunchtime or screw it at dinner time. You might sleep better if you're able to eat and just move on with your day. And ultimately, when we can eat in moderation, that allows us to take back control over our health and weight. Anytime we eat into the excess or extremes, it has a major impact on our digestive system and every other system of our health. So it really is so important. And this is with any area in life. Any area we go to the extreme or excess with, it has an impact. There's that one quote, what is it like? Anything, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. That's what it is. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. That goes with any area of life. So we need to realize that when we get into this excessive mindset with food where we need to have it all right now, or we're cutting it out, it's not helping us anyway. It's not serving us to live the life we want to be living. So what are some things you've tried to do moderation? The first one you might have tried is keeping it out of the house. And trust me, I have done this one more times than I can count. It makes sense. If I binge on sugar all the time, let me just get the sugar out of the house. If I can't control myself around chips, I'm just never allowing myself to buy chips. Great in theory, but the problem is our world still has those foods existing elsewhere, right? So we still have chips out at friends' parties or at the bar. They set a little chip for you. And you still have cake at weddings, or someone brings it over to your birthday, or you go to a friend's birthday party and they have all these treats around that you never allow yourself permission around. So then you're still going to go crazy around the food because you've never had any practice around these foods. You have no idea how to interact with them. The only way you know how to interact with them is cutting them out or binging on them. There's no in between because you've never tried, really. You've never allowed yourself to figure this out. So it still comes around to haunt you, even if you keep it out of the house. Second, you might have tried something like calorie counting or points, where it is kind of disguised, or Noom, that's another one. It's kind of disguised as this thing of, well, you can just eat whatever you want as long as it's within this limit. The problem is when our brain hears limit, there's like a limit to it, it feels restricted still. And when you feel restricted, you have something to rebel against. Okay, so yes, again, in theory, does it make sense? Yeah, I could have this donut while I'm calorie counting because it fits in my calories, sure. But at the end of the day, you still have a number that you are trying to stay under. And let's say you go a little bit over that number, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I've already ruined it and I didn't get that second donut. I really want that second donut. So I'm going to have that now because I've already ruined my day. It still reinforces this all or nothing thinking that we're trying to get away from. The third thing you might have tried is intuitive eating. Now, I am on the side of an intuitive eating-esque coach, I really value tuning into your hunger and fullness and learning those signals and not using calorie counts or meal plans to guide you, to really tuning in and trusting your body. But I also have some problems with intuitive eating because when I started learning how to heal my relationship with food, I found all these Instagram accounts around intuitive eating. And what they tell you is something like this. Well, you've been restricting these foods for so long, so just bring them in the house and get used to having them. And, again, that might work for some people, but for me, when I brought all those foods into the house, I went all out on them and it was a miserable experience because you're trying to eat them without any structure or direction in how to actually listen to your body. So naturally, you're going to fail when this happens because you don't really know, what am I supposed to be doing with these foods? I've never had an interaction with this food in my life in a way that felt good. So it's easy to go all out when you're bringing them all in. And this is kind of like saying, oh, I'm going to do 80-20, 80% healthy, 20% not so healthy, where it's like a good idea. And you're like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But you don't actually have the how of how you're going to do it. There's no steps or instructions of what we're going to do to make it happen. And also when we're thinking about like the 80-20 rule, we can also turn it into a strict rule that we're wanting to rebel against. It can still kind of become this thing of, well, I've already eaten 25% unhealthy today, so I'm just going to say screw it. Or, who's to say that your day shouldn't be 70-30 or 90-10, or maybe the weekends look like 70-30 and the weekdays look like 90-10, like of the proportion of food that is healthy and not healthy. Like we can't turn it into a rule because then we're going to want to rebel against it. So with all of these things, really the problem is we haven't learned how to include these foods, and none of them work on the mindset piece either. And the mindset piece is the most important piece of long-lasting food freedom because we're changing our brain from the inside out. We're not just implementing some random tip and trick. And trust me, I'm going to give you some helpful tips and tricks that are very actionable today, but we really need to work on our thoughts around food in order to make it stick. And that's something I cover extensively in my program as well. All right, so I'm going to teach you my six-step process. I call this my trigger food process because we're using it with foods that trigger you. So any food that is uncomfortable, that brings up anxiety and fear, and especially these ones that we cannot just have one of. Once we have it, we feel like the floodgates are open and we just keep eating. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick one food that feels triggering. The reason we do one food is because if we do more than one food, it's hard to gain progress and momentum with it. I want you to really start to feel confident that, yeah, I can conquer this food. I wonder what other food I can conquer. So I started with doing Nutella because Nutella was something that was always around in my house. It was always available to me and I would always binge on it. I would never just have one spoonful of it. It was always a frantic thing. And I didn't even use a spoon. I stuck my finger in that Nutella jar, if we're being honest. I would do it and then maybe eventually I'd get a spoon because I wanted more. So what I started doing is I started including Nutella with apples, or I'd put it on a piece of toast in the morning. I'd start including it because I wanted to teach myself that I can trust myself around this food. I was going to figure out, no matter how hard it took or how long it took in the long run. Okay, so your second step is you're going to decide how much you're going to have before you start eating it. The reason why this is important is because it recruits your higher brain. Our higher brain is the part of us that is in charge of planning our future and thinking about our goals and our vision and has the true us in mind. It is easier to decide ahead of time on how much food we're going to want to have. Now, this isn't to be like super strict, like I can only have one piece of chocolate and that's it. Like be intentional about it. Be realistic. If you're used to having like binging on chocolate, maybe try to have 3 or 4 pieces first before going down to 1. You can go down to 1, but be realistic and really just decide beforehand, because the second you put it in your mouth, your brain's probably going to tell you, oh, this is yummy, I want more. So we want to decide ahead of time so we have that clear decision in our mind of like, okay, I'm going to have this and I'm going to move on. I'm going to practice eating in moderation. The third thing you're going to do is intentionally include this food at a meal every day. Now, I know when you hear every single day, it freaks you out because you're like, I could not possibly eat this food every day without gaining weight and having a horrible health consequence. But the reason we do it every day is to show your brain it's not going away. You don't need to eat it all now because it's literally going to be there for you again tomorrow or even later tonight. Like it's not that big of a deal. We're trying to take this food off of a pedestal. So some guidelines I use for intentionally including it at a meal is first, I want you to be sitting down, because when we're standing up, we're in action mode. We're go, go, go. So sit down, relax, okay? Put the food on your plate or in a bowl. And I like to do this at a mealtime because the meal is going to help us balance out our blood sugar a bit more. So we're not on this crazy roller coaster for blood sugar if we're just having this food in the middle of the day randomly, like, oh, I'm doing my trigger food now. Like, have it with a meal, and then it also helps fill up your hunger. So if you do have any actual hunger going on, then you're not going to feel tempted to fill your hunger with Oreos or whatever. Like, you have something that's actually going to help you feel fulfilled and satisfied after. Then you're going to want to make sure you have no distractions, because these foods that we're practicing with, they do tend to be a little higher in calories, and that's okay. But it's really important that we're present with the food so we don't miss that satisfaction signal. So we can hear our taste buds change or feel our taste buds change. And we can say, this food isn't really tasting as good as I imagined anymore. Or, I'm getting close to that limit that I decided I was going to make ahead of time. And I really want to be careful of my thoughts that are going on, so we can shift them and make it easier for us to move on and not keep eating. Okay. Then we're going to do abundant shifting thoughts. So right now, you're probably thinking of food as scarce, right? There's only a limited amount of it. I can only have so much, and it's never enough. Never enough food for me. Right? That is going to make it very hard to stop eating if you're telling yourself it's never enough. You don't know when you're going to get it again because it's so delicious. Like, not going to work. So we need to be in this abundance mindset. So abundance looks like, I can have this again later. I am safe to be eating this. This is no big deal. I'm in charge of how much I eat. I'm in control right now. Like, really being like, this is enough. I can really have this food again later. That is the most important one, because that's going to allow us to calm down and not be so frantic around trying to get this food all in. Fifth, we're going to move on with our life. So keep doing what you were doing before. Get out of the kitchen. It's really important to not just sit around the kitchen and like browse through the cabinets again. If you're done with your meal, there's no need to be browsing through the cabinets. Like, move on with your life so we can continue on. And then we're going to celebrate ourselves. That's the sixth step. The sixth and final step is to be sure we get really excited when we do this, because that is going to strengthen that new brain pathway that you are creating that allows you to eat the amount of food that you want to be eating and feel good about it. And when we celebrate, it is like neural super glue for our brain. So it is really going to ingrain it in deeper and make it so much easier. The next time we go eat that piece of chocolate, our brain's going to remember, oh, remember how excited and proud you were of yourself that last time you only had 2 squares of it and moved on? Like, how fun would that be to do again? You want to make this process fun and exciting. Otherwise, you're not going to repeat it. So make sure that you're really, really, really celebrating, get excited, saying, go me, I'm so proud of you every time you do this, so you continue to do it. So the ultimate thing I want you guys to remember today, if this is anything, you can write this down, take a little note of it, take a screenshot of it, as well as the 6-step trigger food process. That's an important one too to have written down. But the only way to learn how to moderate these foods is by practicing eating them in moderation. Okay, you don't learn to ride a bike by watching videos and thinking about it. You learn how to ride a bike by getting out there and doing it and having experience with bikes. And sometimes you fall down and it kind of sucks to fall down, but you get back up so that way you can learn how to ride a bike, because it's so important to you in your life. It's the same with food. You have to get out there. You have to practice with these foods in order to ever make them feel comfortable. And you have to do it in an intentional way, because if you're just eating them right now, I can tell you, you're probably not doing it intentionally. You're not doing it with awareness of your thoughts and mindfulness. And that's the really important part of this process. Okay. So after you do this process, for even a week, you're going to start to notice a huge shift in your thoughts, feelings, and actions around food. It is really amazing. And I would love to know if you're doing the trigger food process and how it's going for you. Now, if you have an urge after you've eaten your food, you're trying to move on, and you get this urge to eat more, I have a very special tool for you, and it's a urge audio. So it's called Get Through an Urge Without Eating. So you know that feeling, you're like, all right, I decided I'm gonna have this much, you're done eating, and then you get that urge. This is a 7-minute guided audio. So you can just pop in your headphones, or if you're alone, listen to it out loud. And it literally walks you through some fantastic reminders of when you get an urge, a visualization to imagine yourself not acting on the urge, which is a really powerful brain tool. And it really is just everything I wish I had when I had urges. I really wish I had like a kind, compassionate, gentle voice to tell me I'm going to be okay and safe and not going to die if I don't act on this urge. So make sure that you download that urge audio and you use it. Don't let it be something that just sits in your inbox, because this is such an effective tool. I worked so hard on this urge audio to really make sure that people would get through their urges without eating, which is the most important thing in our brain rewiring process. So I would love to connect with you. Thank you for staying to the end. You can go to my Instagram at The Confident Eater. I have a Facebook group called Become a Confident Eater. You can also go to my website, theconfidenteater.org. And again, send me a message. I would love to know if you're doing the trigger food process, if you're having questions about it, if you're struggling with it. I am here for you, again, because I have gone through this all myself. And I know the trigger food process can be a little tricky at first, but it's so worth it in the end, to be able to go through, the holidays, to go through the summers, to go through your travels, feeling so confident around food, because you can have exactly how much your body needs. All right. Thank you guys all for being here today. Bye.